We are rolling.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Creative Businessmen. Today we have scientist and comedian Steve Lesser. He has a PhD in neurobiology. Steve, you want to just tell everyone a little about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, all true. Yeah, you nailed it. So I started down an academic route. I got a PhD in neurobiology, as you said. I did a couple different postdocs after, which is the work you do immediately as you think you're staying in academics. But like 90% of people that get PhDs in the sciences, you find your way out. And so I went from there to work at IBM as a consultant, and then from there to a contract research organization, from there to a software company, and now I'm at a different software startup company.
Nice. Now, how did you get into comedy? Because that seems...
That was my saving. That's what saved me through grad school. So I don't know anybody, like, people always are like, oh, you have a PhD in neurobiology, you must be so smart. And that's...
Well, yeah.
But what people don't realize is that the PhD is not, it doesn't test intelligence. It tests endurance more than anything else. And so like everybody's like, oh, you must be so smart. And then I get into these weird arguments of like, no, I'm really not smart. And like, it's a weird argument to get in, let alone want to win. But I'm like, yeah, gotcha.
Told you I wasn't smart.
Told you. But the thing that always wins it for me at the end of the day is when I tell them that I went to school for 23 years.
Oh.
And that is not a characteristic of someone who's smart. That's a characteristic of someone desperate not to work.
Or someone that loves school.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, grad school, I found a topic that I was passionate about. You can't make it through grad school if you don't have a passion for the topic.
Yeah.
I was always fascinated by it. I always had a kind of like a penchant for science, and so I was drawn that way. But, much like many, I wouldn't call it a mistake because I'm really happy about where I ended up.
Yeah.
But it was always kind of very easy next steps that got me from undergrad to grad school, and then grad school to postdoc. And then I said, well, wait a second, what do I want to do when I grow up? And that's where, I realized that while I love science, I don't have to love doing science.
Right.
So my step into industry was using the skills that I thought that were valuable from being a scientist, of being analytical, being a problem solver, and using those skills in the world of business. And so in grad school, I found improv comedy, met my wife there, who you've had on the podcast.
Shout out to Jenny.
Yeah, Jenny Stencil. Woohoo! So we met a couple years into grad school, and while I was like the most burnt out and wanted to just quit, because, like I said, it's a marathon. It's a true endurance race. I found a distraction, of improv comedy, and since I was a little tyke, I always wanted to do comedy. When I was in college, I had a notebook, and I went to one open mic, and I chickened out. I couldn't get up there with the set that I had planned. And then I always conveniently found an excuse not to go back. I was like, yeah, I'm good. And so eventually we went to a show for my birthday and my friend Will in grad school. We went to an improv comedy show. And then the following week, one of my grad school buddies, Marty, came down with an ad. They were trying to advertise for one of the classes. And the exact quote was, dude, you got to do this. He was from California. And I went, okay, and then started doing improv, and it was an 8-week class, and maybe about 12 weeks after I saw the ad and started the class, I was doing shows every weekend, and the rest was history, because at this point, been doing improv since '96, and I lost count, but like, back of the envelope calculation, it's like 4,000, 4,200 shows.
Wow.
Something like that.
That's amazing. Well, I guess science and the arts are sort of related in some ways.
You can get into the arts scientifically. There's just so many ways to get into it.
I guess it's all about ideas,
Yeah.
creativity.
Yeah. So, as you know, when I teach, I like my style is kind of deconstructing what you're seeing, so that as a student of comedy, you can then start to build it purposefully.
Right.
Right. There are people that are absolutely funny because of they grew up that way.
Yeah.
But if you ask them how they're funny, nobody could tell you how they're funny. And so some of these funny people that are, delighting lots of people at parties, at work, maybe on stage, even though that stand-up is a different skill set, and improv is obviously a different skill set just from entertaining your buddies at a party.
Yeah.
But they're going through, they're going through comedy, and they don't know how to be funny. They just are.
Yeah.
And so you give a little bit of background, a little bit of letting the internal funny out with a little bit of here's how you construct funny. Here's how you create funny out of nothing from just a funny idea that you have that could make someone smile if you shared the idea. It's just, that funny premise.
Yeah.
And then you figure out how to put that twist and how to word it, which is the skill of stand-up and creating jokes. And then you can have, I say mind control, but I mean it with...
It is.
I mean it with like italics and quotes around it.
Happy
right?
mind control.
But it, I can't describe it any other way. When like the biggest audience that I did stand-up for is, about 850 people. And when you get a room of 850 people to do the same exact thing at the same time, I think that's mind control. That's what I'm calling it, right? But you're making them laugh all at the same time, and that's a lot of control that you have of, I'm gonna, and there's probably a couple grumps in there, but 848 laughs at the same time is pretty cool, and just that feeling when that many people are laughing because of something you said.
Yeah.
It's hard to ever get out of the business after that.
From a neuroscience perspective, would you call that mirror neuron manipulation?
Could be, because I mean there's definitely some things that you can do that are psychological, that have neurological basis, right? So which makes
it's got to do with empathy, right?
Yeah, and so but that concept of you naturally mirror the emotions that you see.
Yeah.
It's why comics like Stephen Wright always are pretty amazing to me. Of how did you make the whole room laugh by just that monotonic? You're doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And yet just a true delight. It just seems like puts a lot more pressure on the joke writing. Versus you have, people that when they smile on stage, you just want to smile with them.
Right, yeah. That is interesting. But I guess those monotone, really dry comedians, as long as multiple people in the crowd react to it, then it kind of spreads though, right?
Oh, absolutely. So the reactions are definitely are contagious, right?
Yeah.
So it's why comedy clubs pre-pandemic would pack people in, because the closer you are to people, the more their reaction helps feed your reaction, which helps the people next to you feed the reaction.
Right.
So all people have done comedy shows all over have great experiences and bad experiences, and those bad experiences tend to be like really spread out. Someone hires you, they put you in a ballroom, and they're like, hey, we got, like last year for the holidays, I got hired and did a Christmas show, and it was for 100 people. And the day of the event, hey, great news, we got upgraded to the big ballroom. And I was like, no. That's good for you, but horrible for me.
Yeah.
So now, the closest people to me were about 45 feet away.
Oh, no.
And each of the tables were spread out so it's just very hard to engage in that situation.
Yeah, you want them packed in there tight.
Yeah, I think Dimitri Martin has a joke, which I won't remember the joke, but I love the concept. It's a real life lesson for setting up comedy show. And it was, the point of the joke was that the best places for comedy are the greatest fire hazards.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And then like the worst places like the beach, where it's open and
or the drive-in theater.
Exactly. Yeah, because
or Zoom.
Zoom is really hard.
Yeah.
Because you definitely, one of the things that I learned about comedy is that it's a dialogue, and definitely learned that through improv, because you feed off the crowd in a way that you don't in many other. Like the energy you get from the crowd in improv is definitely different than from stand-up. But when I started stand-up, I was like, oh, this is going to be unidirectional. This is from me to them, and that's it. But then I learned again that while the energy isn't the same, you definitely are getting the energy back, and it is a dialogue. And all of your timing and the jokes you choose, it's a carefully choreographed dance as to when you're getting the reactions from them, what the reaction is, what the level of the reaction is. Like, do you through your experience, you figure out, do you layer on another joke immediately after? Do you kind of give them a breath because they need a breath so that they can go back, or that kind of thought process gets even deeper when you get into really long sets, when you're talking about an hour of how do you finish a successful hour of stand-up comedy, because you have to establish that you're funny, but and then you have to win them back at the end when their energy is going down with something that's going to be worth it for them.
Yeah.
So it's fun, and for me, being kind of the analytical guy, I come to it from looking at how other people succeed, and I'm not copying them. I'm not plagiarizing.
Yeah.
But I am taking lessons from what I learn and applying it to my stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely an art. It's a
most definitely.
It's a very ambiguous art form.
It is. It's a strange art form that people think that they can do because they can elicit laughs elsewhere. So I mean, the number of people that think that they are a comedian, and when they find out you're a comedian, they let loose with their stuff, which ranges from like horribly racist things that are not ever funny to stories that they may have laughed at, but I can't find the humor on.
Yeah, stuff that's real specific to a moment,
yeah,
or an experience, and a lot of street jokes and stuff like that too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of street jokes where they found a joke well, I think jokes are rarely emailed around anymore, but they'll the current
they're memes
version
now.
Is a meme, and they'll share a meme and think that they're the most creative.
Yeah. Or they tell you a joke that's actually a riddle.
Yeah.
It's pretty common.
Very common. You can always mess those people up if you want, though, and just answer it differently than what they're like if they ask you, why does a chicken cross the road, or some things, that's cliche and hack, but you can always well, I don't know, and get into the science of it, and they're like, no, that's
go analytical with it.
Yeah. People used to. I did this for a little while until I felt like it was actually mean, and I don't like mean up on stage. But when somebody would tell me a story to include in the act, I would, and then I would give them credit. So it'd be like, this is a guy, Bill, that I met in a show in Kernersville, and Bill lives in Kernersville, and then I'd tell the story that he told me I could use on act. But it was really just, the point of telling it on stage was how unfunny it was, and using that to kind of create the funny, for myself. But then I realized that it's kind of a douche move.
It's still funny though.
Yeah. It kind of satisfied a little impish side of me of like, when they're like, well, you can use this in your act, and you're like, all right, I will.
Make sure you're there.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Because people don't understand what goes into stand-up, because they'll suggest you use anything,
Yeah, and it's not off the cuff. It's very well thought out and planned, and worked out.
Correct. I mean, there's definitely people that have the off the cuff piece,
Right.
and they'll do true crowd work, but a lot of the crowd work is more manufactured than people understand, and it's creating an illusion of being conversational and off the cuff. And my greatest story around that is that in grad school I got to be an extra in Patch Adams.
Really?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So Jenny was the stand-in, so she got to hang out with Robin Williams, but I got to watch Robin Williams. So I was eating hot dogs outside in like the hot North Carolina summer, and she was in an air-conditioned trailer having lobster with Robin Williams. So it was pretty much even.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
That's marriage in a nutshell.
But I was in the scene. It feels like a courtroom scene, but it's not technically a courtroom. But he's trying to defend his ability to stay in med school against a board of doctors, and so it again feels like the courtroom scene. And he would come in every day, and it's a pretty serious scene. Definitely, it has some laughs. All right, it has some light moments like the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
But he would come in and he saw the extras as audience, and he would come in and at the time I wasn't doing stand up, so I didn't really. It took me a few days, and I was a little embarrassed because I went to Jenny. I was like, he really likes talking about Viagra. Like he keeps saying the same things, and like several days later, I was like, he's working on a bit. Now I get it. And he really was trying to figure out what the right words were, the right way to tell the joke, and was using us for that purpose. And then, I got to see him assemble his set for at the time it was supposed to be the last comic relief. So I saw a lot of the work that he was putting in to kind of create that chaos, that manufactured chaos that he's known for.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that this was only what he did, but certainly during this time, I found that to be just masterful, because I always thought that it was just so off the cuff, improvised, just stream of consciousness. And some people were like, well, aren't you disappointed? I was like, no, I just find the fact that it would seem that way.
That he can pull it off that way.
And make it seem that it just makes him just even that much more of a performer.
Yeah, brilliant.
Just absolute genius.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting to see the construction zone that led into that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I always thought he was more of an improviser also, but
Well, he definitely
he did some.
He definitely had the capability of improvising, 100%. And there may have been a time in his stand-up that, he had definitely, stories around, coke and plenty of what people felt were performance-enhancing drugs for comedy.
Yeah.
And some of that may have come from different altered mind, states of mind.
Oh yeah.
But when he got off of that, I think a lot of it was just his pure genius coming through and manufactured, and it's just simply amazing. It's really
Sure.
cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating. What's the biggest comic that you've worked with as a comedian?
Outside of Robin Williams.
Yeah,
when I was an extra.
That you actually have worked on stage with, or in the same show with, I guess.
Well, so through the North Carolina Comedy Festival, I've worked with some really fun ones. So most recently, like Todd Glass was one, and definitely a big name. But lots of folks through the through the Idiot Box, and I did a show with Nate Bargatze.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, when you open for somebody, a lot of times that tickles you more than than the audience. So like it's a cool thing to be able to go up to other comics, but it's like a check mark for yourself to say, oh yeah, I opened for this person.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially someone on that level.
Yeah.
He's a mainstream guy, I guess now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
it's really fun to see somebody on Netflix that you're like, hey, I opened for them. And they might not at all ever remember me. You know, of the many people that have opened for them over the years, you know, are they going to remember that one show in Carborough? I don't know.
Maybe.
You know, but at the same time, I still have the memory of him coming up after the show and saying, hey, that was really funny, you know. And
Yeah, that's
like,
awesome.
That's cool.
It's a win.
Yeah, it really is. It's you know, you know, it doesn't hit the CV. It doesn't come up every day. But you know, when I see somebody on TV that I've worked with, I'm always, you know, tickled.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just people that I know because we, you know, from the North Carolina Comedy Festival. You know, even though, you know, we share who opens for them, so we're not trying to be too selfish for taking those slots. But you know, we'll see someone on TV, and you know, I'll know that person is a nice person because, you know, I picked her up from the airport and I drove her to the hotel, and she was just nothing but kind.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What are your goals in comedy? Where do you want to go with it?
That's a great question, because you know, that changes based off of different periods in my.
I know right now you just want it back.
I really just want to perform in front of people again, but you know, I don't have a single. This is the plan that has to happen, and I find people that don't have that single-minded plan, then hustle to get after it, generally don't ever get to like we would be, because I would be happy touring, doing comedy.
Yeah.
But with the, you know, kind of the commitments to the comedy club, the day job, it's tough to do some of those things. It is tough to give up a steady living for you know, I can pay the bills, and it takes a long time to kind of get to that same level doing stand up.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, I have, you know, 30 minutes of how, you know, what a bad idea it is. Yeah. So when people, you know, come to the club and they're like, "Oh, put me on. I want to be a comedian." I'm sure that's my calling in life. I'm like, all right, you gotta, you know, good luck. Because a lot of people think that, oh, I can make someone laugh, therefore I can make a lot of money at it, and the thousands and thousands of people that are working at it and doing their time and putting the effort in, that's how you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, to fully answer your question, so while I would be happy doing that, I am also very happy contributing to building that for other people as well. So one of the things that I'm really proud of that we've done at the Idiot Box is built a community across North Carolina. And I say we built it, not to say that we're solely responsible for it, but
Heavily contributed to
we're
it.
contributors to it. And I know we've contributed to it because where we were when we started doing stand-up and where we are now, giving opportunities, and you know, that's such an important part of the comedic process for stand-up. You know, Eric Trendy, I use this quote in the class. He had told me, he had told the first class about this concept, which really stuck with me. Of you could, if you wanted to play guitar, you could buy a guitar. You could, you know, buy some books. You could watch some YouTube videos. You can practice in your basement, and then 6 months later, you could go play on stage somewhere, and someone would be like, at least that's good. You know? So if you put in the time and you can practice, that's great. But with stand-up, you have to do the reps in front of people because you have to actually have the dialogue. You have to have those places where you've made some bad decisions around, oh, that joke worked. I'm going to go with this joke. Whoa, that wasn't right. You got to have enough of those to learn from, whether you're kind of analyzing it like I do, or whether you just are using your gut and adjusting on the fly as you go. But you have to be able to go through enough of that where you truly are picking up the way to get better.
Yeah.
And the only way to get better is to keep writing, keep performing, and then it's rinse and repeat.
Right. Yeah.
So much of success is that, though. in everything, like in business and
Oh, 100.
and life. It's like everybody expects they make the decision to do something and they go in this direction, and then at the first little bit of failure, they just quit. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Or the first little bit of success, they quit.
Yeah, or that. It gets
Yeah.
scary.
Get afraid.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
that's the problem with unfairly rewarding somebody. When somebody gets the reward, reaps the reward too quickly, and they didn't put the time in, I think that fear overwhelms them because they know that they're not ready for it. And, I've seen that happen.
You get this
Yeah,
combination of like Peter principling and an imposter syndrome happening at the same time, right? Because
Yeah.
they get some success,
Yeah.
and they get thrust into something, and at the same time they have this "I'm a fraud" kind of thing going on. And I think you're right.
Yeah. We see it in business. We've got people that I've got people that have been putting time in, years in, growing, little by little, step by step, fighting for every inch, right? And they've built up through that, because of that process, they've got some form of stability and diversity, and they've gone through adversity, enough of it to where they're not deterred by it, and they know it's rinse, wash, repeat, right? And then sometimes you'll see someone come in and seem to hit it overnight, but the problem becomes it's so unstable, because if one thing happens that takes that person didn't put all that hard work in, and they actually start to celebrate, and they stop working on their craft, and they stop working on growth, and some switch goes off, and they go, I've already made it. I know how to do this, right?
Yeah.
And they it's like they stop trying to learn, and they go, I've already got it figured out. And it's
like-
actually the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
It's like when us hairless apes created nuclear weapons.
Like, done. There we
Yeah.
go.
Oh, we made this thing, and they kill a bunch of people, and they're like, oh, well, maybe we're not ready for these yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
well,
this is a mistake.
I think when you have success, without the hard work, that success that you built is more inbred,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And what I mean by that is it's easier to take apart. So when you do hit something, you don't have the 10 things that everybody else would have. The people that got there through the hard work,
Yep.
they have 10 answers to that problem.
Yes. That's
right.
And you just had the one answer, and your
Yep.
answer isn't going to fly against this problem.
Yeah, you develop a mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, and the atomic thing, I'm not laughing about the horrors that humanity has created
Right.
with that,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like if you don't have the mentality, then you just use it as a sledgehammer instead of using it as a precision tool
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
accomplish something positive.
Yeah.
And the same thing in business. If you don't have that mentality, then you have all this responsibility suddenly, and
Yeah.
you don't know what to do with it or how to control it, and you lose it.
Misuse it. Or
Yeah.
you misuse it. We've
Yeah.
seen, we've got somebody that we consult with and do business with now that I wouldn't say got unfairly awarded. I would say didn't have to go through a lot of what other people do, so the learning curve was much less than normal. And I think one of the things I'm seeing that's kind of funny now is they have all these ideas, which is great, but they don't know all these life lessons they've missed,
Yeah.
right? And so now they've got money, a little bit of money, right? But it's actually quite a bit of money if we want to be comparing to others, and they're about to take this massive shot at something, and they haven't learned the 10 or 12 or 20 things that I think these are reasons you shouldn't do this. And had they had put that time in, they would also agree. I wouldn't have to convince them. And sometimes our job, our part of a deal is just as a consultant is I may give you some advice. I'm going to give you a reason that I think you should do something. I'm going to give you all the supporting facts that make me think that way. But at the end of the day, you've got to make the decision, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen, and I think I see currently, some people that are just about to set it on fire. And at some level, I did that. I lost $10 million. I set it on fire, basically. $12 million if we want to be technical, because I was negative $2 million. Fictitious number, but I set it on fire. And today I can joke and say, better to learn a $10 million lesson than a $100 million lesson, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But are they going to be able to joke? Whatever the number is, a $100,000 lesson, a $10,000 lesson. Some of these we've watched. They're learning lessons now, and instead of them learning the lessons when it costs very little, right? When it was more of pride and lesson to their determination and their grit and their fortitude. Like now, they're going to learn a lesson that's going to cost them financially, and that is probably worse. You know, harder to recover from.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lesson in the stock market. Just, you know, my buddy was.
Was it this year?
No, this was back in grad school.
I was gonna say, man, it's volatile this year.
But
yeah,
this is when the original bubble burst.
Oh, in the 90s.
And my buddy had just gotten an inheritance and was just day trading. And one day came in, also from California, and was like, "Dude, you got to do this." and so I started. I opened up the account, and in high school, my dad had made my brother and I take $1,000 out of our own money that we made and invest and buy shares in something. So I picked the Mirage Casino.
I like it.
That's cool.
And so
it's a good pick.
I still, it was solid. Super solid.
Yeah.
And that $1,000 when I was in so that was in high school, but when I was in grad school, that $1,000 was worth over $10,000.
Yeah, nice.
So I took the $10,000, I sold all the Mirage stock, and then put that into the market. And I was doing the same day trading, and I had maybe about a week of, wow, this is really easy before the bubble burst. And one of the other things that my friend taught me is how to trade on margin. And so that was cool while it was going up.
Oh yeah, always.
But when it goes down, it seems to propel you to the brick wall real fast.
When you get into that kind of stock trading, it just looks like straight gambling to me. Like,
well,
like people trade on the losses too, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
You bet that it's going to lose. So I don't know what level you were margining at, but I'm assuming that were you going 100%?
Yeah.
So basically, you only have a 50% shift in the stock, you lose 100% because you're losing.
Right.
Correct.
50 of your money, 50% of your money, but you're also losing 50% of the margin funds.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
It's definitely.
So at the end of the day,
sucks.
when I turned that 1,000 into zero,
Yeah.
it was.
So you went 1,000, 10,000, 0.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that really hurt at the time because I was in grad school, so that was like a year's worth of money.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
But it was also several years worth of money.
I learned a real big lesson out of that.
Yeah.
Because one of the other things that struck me, another story that from what you were saying is when I was I worked for IBM. One of my coworkers had a daughter who took a year off from college. She was a college freshman somewhere near Chicago, and she took a year off to work as kind of like an entry-level marketing person in this little company called Google.
Oh,
I don't know if you've heard of it. And she was there and enjoyed it and was truly basic, entry level, but was there at the right time because when they went public, she got to participate, and so she ended up with $1 million in cash. And I was talking to her dad, and I was like, "You must be thrilled." And he's like, "No, that's the worst thing that could happen." Right? She now thinks that $1 million will just pop up every time she goes for an entry-level job. To your point of of success for nothing.
Yeah.
He was afraid that she wasn't going to understand the hard work you need to keep that money.
That's right.
The hard work you need to for all of the decisions for pieces of that.
That's right.
She went and bought a house with cash, and that was his example. He said, "Remember I told you?" And even though it wasn't like crazy mortgage rates, and so you're absolutely right. The lessons that you learn along the way are really, really informative.
Did it work out for her in the long run? Did she?
I don't know.
Oh, you should go back and look.
I'll have to check out.
I've always seen money that comes easy goes easy, and I'll tell you, we've got some people that we obviously we've got clients that we consult for, but we've also got a very small group that we mentor as well. And one of the things that I've heard you say, one of the things I say regularly is you don't want it overnight. Like I've got people. I had to break down yesterday. And this is a very, very small number, but this gentleman, much younger guy, he has $2,000 invested, right? And he was complaining about his return because he forgets the fact that he only has $2,000 invested. But he was that week let's say he had made $17, and he was upset about it. And I'm like, annualize that return. It's unheard of, right? Like your problem here is time. One, you haven't had enough time at what you're doing, and two, the initial amount of your investment. So time is going to pass. Don't make dumb decisions. Don't chase overnight riches, right? Don't chase it, because the worst thing you can have happen is you chase overnight riches. An example of that would be taking the $2,000 and going buying $2,000 worth of lottery tickets and hitting the lottery and thinking you did something right.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you could do, right? Because your behavior, I'm not saying you shouldn't buy lottery tickets. Buy them if you'd like, but you shouldn't buy them as a business investment.
Yeah. It should be a retirement plan.
Yeah, exactly. You're 100% correct. But that's what people do with the stock market, and margin is the same thing. And people can say, oh, well, if you use proper balancing, and I only use margin on 20 to 30% of the liquidity in my account, I still think that's a mistake.
Yeah, I've since that moment, there's no margin. I sell options, but not in a crazy way. It's covered call options.
Yeah, I like that. I'm not a big margin guy. I dabble. It helps calm my brain.
You've had a good year this year with the stock.
I have. I've done very well, but I don't do margin. I thought about it very briefly, and I was like, nah, don't do it. Again, I come back to that money I lost, whatever that number was, right? I come back to that, and it goes, don't be stupid, because the market's so volatile. Well, that's the worst time to do it. And margin's dangerous, because if the market is rising, your margin, the amount you can get, grows so quickly.
Yeah, huge.
It's huge. It feels exponential, and it's a dangerous game. And I'm like, and I've done some things. Some of it's lucky timing, and you can't time the market specifically.
Correct.
But I was worried about the battery news. I was with Tesla. I've said to him, I think I'm going to do this, and it's been like, there's no mathematical form. It's literally like common sense. This is Warren Buffett, like probably Warren Buffett-esque if he did stuff like this. It's like common sense approach. I think some negative news could come out, or some basic news. There's been a lot of hype. The stock's probably going to fall. I think I'll sell.
Yeah.
Or, hey, I think the stock's going to go up because these factors keeping it down. Hey, so-and-so went on and smoked weed and his stock tanked, and this is temporary because people are going to forget that he smoked weed, right?
Yep.
And I went in and bought it at the bottom, right? Like, I literally just started using like super common sense. Warren said if the thing that's forcing the price of the stock down or up has nothing to do with the fundamentals of the business, right? Well, then the business will return. The value will return back to that point.
Yeah.
So I keep that rule in mind, and I go, and I'm liberal with it, but that's kind of like, that's my thing. And I feel like I'm playing. I'm not, but I mean, for my mind, it feels like I'm playing.
Yeah.
But I don't transition to the gamble, which I feel like a lot of people are doing. They're using this as a new way to gamble.
It's actually so easy just to look at the general numbers of buying regularly.
Yeah.
And in that case,
it's dollar cost averaging, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people from the outside that don't necessarily understand will label that gambling.
Yeah.
But and technically it is.
Could be.
But it's gambling when you have the house advantage. Of centuries worth of data showing that in the long run you're going to be great.
100%. And for the people, I don't want to call out a family member, but so I won't say his name, but I have a family member that I had said something very close to this recently, and I'm like, look, instead of buying lottery tickets, okay, at minimum, why don't you try buying stocks? Like I don't suggest day trading. I don't suggest it lightly, for one. But I would much rather you do that than go buy lottery tickets, right? Like, if we're going to compare, investments,
Yeah.
And we were talking about something. I think he's spending about $80 a week on lottery tickets, and that's a lot of money.
That's huge. I mean, that was one of the things I showed to the kids, just the model of if you put $1 a day away. Like, if we were able to put $1 a day away. And that was the investment, and there was no fees.
Right.
You hit $1 million.
Index funds.
You hit $1 million if with just in your 50s with just $1 a day. So when you talk about 80 a week, it adds up fast. And then if you combine that with time, you're talking about something that person generally feels is a significant number. In 7, 14, 21 years.
Yeah. Well, and 80, and I felt like he probably was lying to me about the 80. I think it was more. Mm-hmm. But let's assume it was 80. That's 80 that is disposable. Whether it is or not, he's coming up with a way to come up with the money to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Which means there's actually probably more money. So if he started doing it this way and saw some level of result, or at least just was motivated by the growth and got into it the way he gets into the lottery, I think what would happen is he would find a way to put more than 80, right? Because that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
You kind of, it gets addictive.
With me, it does.
Yeah. So
it does, because I'm addicted to the idea of, as much as I like my day job now, I have vision of doing other things, and which would give me more time to do comedy. Because if I'm not tied down to a day job, then Jenny and I were talking about, well, we just go Airbnb in New York and go hang out with our friends, do comedy, and I might not be doing the cellar, but I'll get to hang out with people that I love doing comedy with. And
Right, yeah.
How cool is that?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's life experience too, man. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, that's part of being successful is also being able to have more time to do things you want to do.
Yeah. Well,
Managing your time.
Plus, I've been talking about some stuff that I just never get around to, and like if I could get to that place, then I'd have the time to, there's a documentary I've been dying to actually produce, and so, being able to actually put the time in to really understand how to monetize it and get the investment lined up, and to then go out and do it and deliver it. It's just not easy to do when you have two businesses and a day job.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, talking about gambling with the stock market, I was joking, but investing, you're taking a risk, and also in any business or any investment, it's always a risk. You can always
Absolutely.
lose.
yeah.
I know you're also an entrepreneur. What businesses do you own, or have you owned?
So the comedy club, the Idiot Box Comedy Club.
Yeah.
And
But you guys
then-
opened that 20 years ago?
Ish. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's closer to 20 than it is 15 now, but it's in between those two.
And that's sort of a
and-
passion business, right?
What's that?
That's-
Yes, definitely.
yeah.
We do that for the love of it. We've had good years. We've had bad years.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is that we also run the business like it's a one of it's a business of passion.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Because if we would have made very different decisions. We probably would have been less supportive of the comedy community if we had to feed the kids on that money, because we would have had we'd have had less options about how we run the business. So
Right.
I don't have any issues around the choices that we made, because the choices that we made allow us to do shows that would feature local and regional people on every Friday night for the most part, and then bring in people occasionally. Like that's the model that we have, and it's there's a reason that it's not the same model that
Comedy Zone.
Comedy Zone or
Right, yeah.
or
Because Paul's not a comedian. I'm not dogging
Right.
Paul, but he's a
Correct.
business person. He's not
Correct.
a comedian. So
Yeah.
it's ran. He's making a business decision typically.
correct. And if
Yeah.
you look at all the comedy clubs across the country, it's there's very few mom and pop comedy clubs out there.
Yeah.
Dead Crow is another one in North Carolina. Timmy Sherrill owns that one, and he's a good guy, and they've been doing well.
Where's that at?
In Wilmington.
Oh, okay.
But I take some pride to say that we're the longest running mom and pop comedy club in North Carolina.
That's awesome.
And I don't know, my brother's an accountant, and one of his clients owned a comedy club up in New York, upstate New York, and to make to make money doing that, he couldn't live off of one. He had to have 20.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when I was opening up the comedy club, my accountant brother was giving me the advice of, that's an awful plan. That's a
Yeah.
really awful plan, because here's someone who needs 20, so don't plan on living off of it. And we haven't. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
been good. We get to run a business, keep it in the black, but if we're barely in the black, we're okay. And then if we end up in the red because we move and we have to reinvest and do the upfit again, we're also okay, and we'll dig out of that over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's part of that business is also an outlet for you too, for both of you guys, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's nothing better than having a crappy week of work where it's just all day. And sometimes I'm so tired I don't want to go. but the fact that I have to go is really good. And then I laugh and I have a good time. And
you're glad you went.
So glad I went,
Yeah.
right? And it just it keeps me sane, and then it actually makes me better at the day job.
Yeah.
Like I have no doubt that I am where I am. I have a VP title. I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the ability to kind of reset on the weekends, but also the lessons that I learned there.
Yeah.
You know, talking about about the lessons that you learned, the lessons that I learned performing, I use those in like the improv skills of being a good team member, but also being a good boss, right? What is it really that I want? I don't want actually to be a dictator at work. That doesn't foster the right team. Just like on the on the improv stage, if you're like, I'm the funniest one up here, I deserve to be up here, and everybody else serves my stage time. There's so many managers out there that's how they run their teams.
Yeah.
Versus, how do you empower everybody on the team to be the best team member for the sake of the team? And that's really
Right.
something that I learned so much from performing with other people and finding out what their purpose was on stage. And I don't mean it's a single purpose, but like, what do they bring to the table that's unique?
Right.
And then you get that heterogeneity. It's the same kind of thing when you have a team that's built up on one person, whether it's a improv show or whether it's in business. If it's just it's very inbred. When you find something if you find an issue that person doesn't know how to handle, then the team breaks down and nobody can figure it out.
Yeah.
It's a big weakness, and actually, and this is not me saying, sometimes I feel like I'm wearing I'm wearing too many hats. Neil's wearing too many hats sometimes, and I go, that very thing, like if for some reason, if I own a business that does not operate or doesn't function properly without me there with every waking second, then really what I own is a job. And so sometimes we have to be really careful that we aren't putting ourselves in this position where we control too many things, right? We really need other people. And so one of the things you were talking about, it's not necessarily about comparing myself to them or comparing others to each other. It's really about that person. What do they bring to the table? What are their strengths? Like, and them being the best them. And that whole kind of cliche, the rising tide, the rising tide, raises all ships or whatever that. What is that? Yeah,
I think you nailed it.
Something like that. And that's kind of the thing for us. Especially our core group, it's like if we can help everybody, I think I have more room for improvement than everybody else because I believe I've got a lot of potential. But if I've got a lot of potential, it means I've got a lot of room for improvement. And I say that to them. I say that to myself. And so for me, it's not about comparing these guys amongst themselves or ladies. It's about, hey, what is your potential? What is it you hope to accomplish? What are your strengths? What are some things you want to work on? And then like we get this symbiotic relationship that really it fosters a culture, which has happened at the Idiot Box, and it changes people's lives. Like that's kind of what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, and so like our mission to support the comedy community actually then extends beyond that, because if we can make people more successful in their regular lives, that has this is the really cool domino effect.
It's rewarding.
So I've heard. I live in Mooresville, Lake Norman, and I'll be honest with you. I'm a huge fan of comedy. I grew up. My father and Paul were friends, and at 13 I was in Comedy Zone. I don't know what the age limit is supposed to be, but I was in there at 13. And
I was doing the same at our comedy club.
Yeah. So I mean and I was in there and I got to be around a lot of that, and I was always fascinated with it. I've joked with him and other guests that I'd like to try it sometime, just because I think I'm glutton for punishment. But
I know a class you can take.
Yeah, definitely. But it's interesting that I've always been kind of like a fan of it, but I've never been to the Idiot Box, right? But I was talking to a neighbor, actually the one you met from that's in New York, but he's from Greensboro, and he was talking to me about a night at the Idiot Box. This was 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, now this guy lives in New York now, right? And he's got a house near me, a second home, but he was telling me about in college going to the Idiot Box, and so it's just like you guys have. You have so much reach, and you just wouldn't even think about it like that. But
occasionally I do.
Yeah.
Right? So being the nerd I am, like you calculate. I said I was in 4,200-ish improv shows. I don't actually have a real good way of calculating how many stand-up shows I've done or how many sketch shows.
Yeah.
But that's just rounded out to be 4,800 shows over the year, because I've been doing improv since the mid-90s. I've been doing stand-up for the last 15, 16 years now. It's probably 17. And sketch happens far less frequently, but that's also from the mid-90s. So maybe 4,800 shows. You figure out how many people came to those shows over the years and how many laughs you did, and it's not to say that every laugh has a long-lasting effect, but it's better than no laughs.
That's right.
So if you took that, so it's it is kind of a cool thing to think about of how many lives you've touched, even if it was just for a 90-minute show.
Yeah,
that's a really cool thing.
It is.
It's the part of the business, the comedy business, that is, I feel, rather noble.
Yeah.
Right, because I don't care, what type of person is in the audience. I recognize them as a human being that I want to make laugh, and any positive reaction, I'll deal with a smile if that's all they can muster.
Yeah.
I actually enjoy the challenge. Sometimes I'll see somebody in the audience being really grumpy at other comics, and I'm like, I'm gonna make that dude laugh, right? And for the most part, I start off and I actually use the very first thing to disarm that person that I usually do is I make eye contact with them and smile, right? It's that mirroring thing of saying, look, we're connecting here.
Yeah, I see you. Yeah.
And that usually starts it. And I also recognize I am not the world's funniest comedian, but I have talents and I have skills at doing it, so I'm relatively successful in what I do. But I love the fact that most of the time that grump, I can at least get some reaction. And I still remember the people that I didn't win over. There was this guy at Good Nights in Raleigh, and I told the comics after, and they tried too, and he just was sitting there, crossed arms, and just nobody could budge that guy.
Why are you here?
Yeah, why'd you even come? Why'd you even come? So they did a study, and I'm going to butcher this, so I'm not going to try and get too specific, but they were saying that naturally gifted people, right, like how many people that were naturally gifted actually made it to a certain level, and they were looking at like classical pianists, classical violinists. They were looking at these people, and what they really found out was there were 0 naturally gifted people that actually made it to the top level solely based on natural gift, right? What they found is that the people that put the time in, so like 99.8% of them that had gotten it, and this is at like 20 years old, had already logged between 12 and 15,000 hours working on that craft. And so at that point, what determines success at that level? So you're in competition with the people, let's say, whatever that number is, of people that have put that level of effort.
Yeah.
And so level of success at this point, there might be one thing or another that would land them the role, but typically it was the one that would outwork the ones that would put the most effort in, because it had to be second nature, had to be. And so if you think about it, it's an obsession with it. Yeah. But that's like, and I think that's how success should work. I think if you're just ultra resilient, you just pour everything into it, because you've got so much time under your belt, right? Like you're saying, oh, I'm not the funniest guy. You've got time. I've never heard you in stand-up comedy. I just because of the amount of time, it's got to be good.
He's saying he's not the funniest guy, but he's a very humble guy.
Yeah, he's humble. Yeah.
Ah, shucks.
Yeah.
He's the most humble guy.
Jenny, earlier, before we started recording, he was actually giving you full credit for the club and all kinds of good stuff. Just want to say that, just so you know. He's very humble.
He's obviously very funny, too.
Yeah. So. I'm sure you are, man, because you can't do something that long and not get better at it.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't open for Nate Bargatze and be...
Yeah, man.
Yeah, well, the people that... the people that walk in the door and understand that have a shot at being what they want to, from a dream perspective. Yeah. The people think that, they come in and they're going to instantly get their Netflix special and want me to represent them that don't quite have a clue.
Yeah.
Those are the people that won't.
It's called delusion.
Reasons.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So we had a guest on, and I can't remember which one it was, but he was talking about his son and his son's unwillingness sometimes to go out and hit the bucket of balls, right? He's going to hit 50 balls a day. And he was talking about that it's very unlikely that his son would be successful. He's unwilling to hit those balls. So literally, I think major league, any major league sport, if you look at those individuals, are the people that put in this extreme work ethic starting from a very early age, right? And they continue to do the same activity over and over and over and over and over without taking into consideration the results. The result did not deter them, because they're going to have victories and they're going to have losses.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't deter them from putting the work in. And you do that over a long enough period of time, and you don't quit. You go through all this things, right? And eventually, as you continue to do it, and you get to let's say you get in college, what you've done is surround yourself with peers that have done the same thing. So now you get to outwork them.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, to me, like you tell me you want to be in the major leagues. My children don't say that, but if they did, if they wanted to do then I'd say that this is the problem: rinse, wash, repeat every day. So what I do require is, if they say they want to do something, they have to make a 1-year commitment, and they can't quit. You're not allowed to quit. Which also means, for me as a parent, that I'm not allowed to quit them, that I have to
Correct.
make sure that I provide them the way to get there and force them in as polite a way as possible. We don't quit, and what's happened is, now I've got 2 that have been doing Taekwondo for 3 years, and I think that's more so from just a confidence builder thing. I've got Daniel's coming up on 2 years of rock climbing, and they get it. And now what's funny is, let's say that they want to add something else. They go, do I have to commit to a year? And I'm like, you're not going to know. You can't go try something day 1, week 1, month 1, and go, whether you like it or not. You got to give it time.
Yeah.
It's a year minimum, because how do you, if I made a commitment to come to the Idiot Box and to try, I would have to make a commitment to myself and keep it regardless of outcome.
Correct. So, the class has a lot of support to make sure that your first show is successful. We end the class with a show, and those are some of my favorite shows. But you have to have the strength to continue after that success.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that that's where a lot of people drop off. And as fun as it was, I've had people say that was the best thing that they've ever done in their life, and then never show up again.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, wasn't it you that said that was the best thing in your life? The best thing in your life. I won't name names because they had families. And if that was my father, I'd feel hurt.
Yeah.
The best thing in your life, and you're not gonna show up the following week and go to the open mic because you're tired, or it doesn't make sense.
And that's I look at success that way a lot, and obviously there are factors, there are things, right? Things that are beyond an individual's control. But again, it's sometimes success is just resilience.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah. But this kind of all wraps back into the question that you asked me towards the top of, what do I want out of comedy? Mm-hmm. And I had said that I might not ever be at doing that, and then I kind of said, if you don't have that single purpose, you don't often get to that single purpose. So while being a touring comedian, it would be fine to me, but at the same time, how do you measure success? And I have multiple different paths that I consider successful. So running the club, training people, teaching people, getting people better. I mean, even if it's just sharing a tag to somebody so that the next time they go up they can be better, or pointing out something that didn't go well and giving them some encouragement so that they can work on it and show up the next week. All of those things kind of still fall into a bucket of success. So that's why I try to instill that with my kids too. My kids are of the age where they're trying to figure out what they want to do in their life, and I try to keep them away from that single purpose. Yeah. I think the single purpose is I'm not saying it never works, but I have seen single purpose people who hit a wall and then they feel like they lost all
the time.
All the time, but they lost their purpose in life. Yeah. Yeah. And it sends them into a spiraling depression. And so we got to be realistic. We can't all do everything. Yeah. But we can all be Renaissance men and women of various degrees. And I actually think every time you take a path down one, it strengthens you for another one.
Yeah.
You know, just like I said, the comedy world is strengthened my day job stuff. It's, you know, it's strengthened my family stuff, and then family strengthens. It's all it all builds upon each other.
You've helped a lot of people become successful in comedy too.
Yeah, well, that's really awesome, because like people that we've given opportunities to are, you know, in New York being really successful, or friends of, like it's really fun to turn on the TV and back when there was commercials and be like, oh, there's Sachel on a Sonic commercial, you know. Now you don't get commercials unless you watch Hulu.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we just had AJ and Al Schrader on too a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw
you guys helped them get into improv. So,
yeah.
Where you taught them.
Yeah. So AJ, you know, was kind of one of our first, like in like one of the first classes, and he's uber successful, and you know, from my, you know, he might not say that because he's also a humble guy, but super talented, super funny, and award winning, and he has a passion for, you know, for sketch comedy in a way that most people don't.
Yeah.
And his podcast is a delight. Everything he does is a delight. And then Aldon is one of the most creative people I know. He's so fun to perform with. So that's the kind of the thing. Like when you get to know people like Al and AJ, they're just beautiful people. And like how can it not be fun to do a sketch show with those two?
Right. Yeah.
You know.
You also talked about being singular focused, you know, one thing, and which for years I was in business. I've got probably, you know, I don't know, tens of thousands of hours in business.
Yeah.
But
it's probably light.
but in art, I've always been, like, since I was a young kid, I was always artistic and creative, and I really always thought I'd be in that something in the art field, you know, whether it's performance art or just painting and drawing and stuff. But it didn't go that way because my analytical side took over. But I got back, had a bunch of losses in the 2013 range. It was about 2013, started having some big losses. Got into acting, lost my leg during that time, but started pursuing more art stuff too. And I've actually, what's the word? Condensed my professional life where I can focus on certain things that really interest me, like consulting, certain business aspects I really enjoy. Mm-hmm. I've kept that. I've sold everything else. And then on the art side, acting and writing. Started doing open mics a year ago to improve my comedic writing, and then sort of got addicted to that.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy it. You know, I didn't plan on being a stand-up comic, but I just kept going back to the mics. I still don't consider myself a stand-up comic, but I really enjoy going to the open mics and performing. So
if you keep going, keep putting in the effort.
Yeah.
There's going to be a day where you're going to make that decision on stage in front of the audience, and you're going to feel like a comedian. You're going to go, oh, that's something that I never thought I was going to be able to do.
Well, I had a couple of good experiences right before the quarantine.
Yeah. Timing.
Yeah. So I had a Friday night at the Idiot Box. I did an open mic after the Friday night show, and it seemed like the whole audience just stayed for whatever reason for the open mic. So it was a big crowd, and my set went really well, and I was like, oh, this is what this is like.
Yeah.
And they just, were just laughing constantly the whole set. I was like, this is amazing. And actually, it helped me improve that specific set. It was, or a bit, it was part of a set. It was 5 minutes. So, but I actually added some things into it during that set because of the reaction I was getting from the audience. And it was amazing.
Absolutely. When I started, I wasn't, even though by the time I started doing stand-up, I had done 3,000 improv shows.
Wow.
And, I had kind of this false sense of confidence around stand-up. I wrote my first set, it went really well. And I was like, oh, I guess all of this improv stuff makes me a master at this too. and it's not to say that I didn't learn anything from that. Obviously, I pulled a lot from like reading an audience and trying to be in the moment. But I also undid a lot of things. Like I'm only now back in the moment. Like when I started doing stand-up, I was so rigid. If I wrote it, I said it. So if the joke was over and I could tell the joke was over, I essentially said, come on, audience, we're going to power through to the end.
I have the same problem.
And so you're going to find a time where you're going to let go of that. You're going to say, all right, I'm just going to let my gut tell me how to finish the set.
Yeah.
And you have to have enough material to do that. If you only have 3 minutes of material, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. But once you start to get a larger, if you're doing 5 minutes and you have 12 minutes, and you start to think about, oh, this bit didn't go very well. I guess they don't like that kind of thing. Let me switch gears to this other thing. And when that works, there's really a feeling of power and command of the art at that moment of, oh, that's the brushstroke I needed to kind of have this effect.
Right, yeah.
It's really cool.
I had a lot of acting experience before doing the open mics, and I feel like that helped with being more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But because there are some similarities in acting and stand-up.
There are, and I'm not an actor, right? So
Yeah.
I've acted in things, including being an extra.
With Robin Williams.
With Robin
Yeah.
Williams. Did I mention that before? The things that I've acted in, I have a hard time with certain emotions, and certain things come more natural to me.
Yeah.
In life. Like I'm not generally angry, so it's tough for me to play angry. Like we were doing, we got hired to do like a series of training videos for Southwest, and I was supposed to be an angry customer, and the director was like, can you really do it? I was like, okay, I'll be more angry, but it was really just tense, if anything. So definitely there's things that you can always bring across, but then there's always things that you need to learn. And one of the things that an actor friend who did both improv and was also a trained actor kind of said that I've assumed was true, was that acting is around like subtleties, and especially with improv, it's around exaggeration and hitting the, kind of like big, going big. So it's the difference between going big and going small, but having the ability to do that in an authentic way is a real big kind of key difference. But at the same time, that comes from the same set of acting skills.
Mm-hmm. I feel like with acting, it's all about choices. Mm-hmm. And your choices may not have anything to do with the scene that you're working on. And sometimes you have these monstrous choices, huge choices, and you have to hold back to not, you want people to see it under the surface so it's authentic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
like if you do and you can do that in improv very easily. You make a bold choice about your character, and it may never ever come out. Like you could say, you know what, I'm gonna be a serial killer in this scene, but this scene isn't about killing somebody. It was about you shopping and finding out there's no Lucky Charms or something like that.
Oh yes,
right?
yeah.
And so whatever it is, you then you have this little secret that kind of informs your character of how to react. But you can do that in everything. Like I think when you do stand-up, even you need to have that energy behind you of like, I have a secret, and that secret is this is going to be really funny. And even if you're monotonic, you have to have that energy of this is good, and that confidence that comes with that.
Well, I think even those deadpan comics, there's like a mischief in their eyes that almost conveys that idea with the audience. Like you can just see it. It's almost like you see their thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's part of the humor,
Yeah, and sometimes when they break a little bit,
Yeah.
it's even more precious.
Yeah, like they can't keep it together because they know
Yeah,
it's
because like I
sort of
saw
laughing inside.
I saw a video of Stephen Wright kind of laughing, and I was like, that's the most amazing thing ever. Or when Mitch Hedberg would kind of leave his persona for a moment and smile
Yeah.
and open his eyes behind his sunglasses. Like it was really cool. Like those kind of things are really, like even more, they've made it more important because of the way their style is.
Did you see the special that Mitch Hedberg did when he messed up? He may have been just doing a show somewhere, but he messed up his punchline, and then he like called himself out on it and said, "Oh, that's supposed to be like this," and just kind of laughed, and everybody just roared. You know, it's funny because he's so in it. You know, then
well, audiences automatically know when you're being authentic.
Yeah.
And even though there is that lie that the audience and comedian are going to pretend doesn't exist, the audiences truly do know that the material that's coming out of your face has been done before, it's prepared, even if it seems natural.
Yeah.
But when you have one of those screw ups and then you're in the absolute moment, it's really hard the audience in that moment knows exactly this is in the moment. And and in that world, you drop out of stand-up and now you're in improv. And I've always said that improv comedy has a lower bar for laughter. I'm not trying to say that it's not a skill and amazing improv people do amazing things. I'm not trying to say that at all. I'm just saying that if you took a transcript from an improv comedy show and said that was the funniest show ever and you videoed it, it would be lacking. And the magic of improv is that everybody watching it and everybody in it knows that it's coming out right now, so everything is a surprise.
Yeah, it's all silly and
but it's all exaggerated.
Yeah,
it's all bigger. So
over the top.
And sometimes over the top is going the other way, right? So you can exaggerate in either direction and get something really big or really small. And something, if you have a small reaction to something that normally has a big reaction to it, that's interesting. Right. So and then simultaneously, if you overreact to being out of paper towels, that's also pretty interesting. The audience starts to engage in that, and like these unusual choices that you make, as long as they're kind of bounded in reality, can have this amazing reaction because it's a surprise to the audience. And I think that's one of the keys to comedy, as I teach, is coming up with these surprises. And I think for improv, because of the art and the way it's structured, surprises come easier to the form.
Yeah, I think with acting, the stand-ups actually helped me with acting too. It's contributed to my acting with timing and stuff. Like I'll notice things in the script now that I don't want to say deliver the lines because you're not really doing that, but when you're taping a scene or something or taping an audition, I'll think about it a little differently sometimes because of doing stand-up. Like
from doing comedy,
with pacing, it's really good.
Yeah, from doing comedy, I learned, and this happens I've used this lesson in both in the little bit of acting I've done, but also in the day job of commanding the silence. And there's lots of times where the silence is far more important.
Yeah.
Like if you're giving a talk and it's a room full of people and everybody's been looking at your slides, and if you got them engaged and you pause for a second, you just draw them in closer for your next point. So like you can command where they're paying attention and how they're paying attention in the same way, whether it's stand-up or acting. So I agree. I think that's the pacing in particular can have a lot to do with what you communicate. I've always, so again, being a scientist, I've always wanted to do various experiments on stage. So I would like to take a set that I know works. Like it can't be a long set for obvious reasons, but like take a good solid 5 minutes that I know works, and then I would like to take it and type it out and put it into Google Translate and translate it to a language that I don't know. right? And then I would like to perform it in that language that I don't know. And I still think that if I structure it the same way and I convey it the same way, that I still think I'm going to get laughs. I might not get some of the witty laughs, you know, if it's a joke based off on like a double entendre or something. It ain't going to fly if they don't understand the language.
Right.
But if
you have to reorganize the jokes.
Yeah. See, I mean,
Yeah.
I still think that there's so much of a signal from the comedian to the audience that now's the place to laugh, that I still think that the set like that would have a degree of success.
There's a few comics that do that, right? Doesn't Eddie Izzard do that?
Yeah, except the difference is he knows the language.
Yeah, he knows. It's French,
So,
right?
wait,
Or what does he do it in?
I think he's
British.
Yeah, well, I think, or Australian.
Is he?
He's got a silly accent.
Yeah.
He's
Or-
British.
British?
I was thinking he was
Okay,
British. Yeah.
Cool. But he's, he's done definitely English, definitely French, but I think it's like four or
Oh,
five
wow.
different languages that he's done stand up in, and very impressive. But
Yeah.
he knows both the language and the art that he's doing, and can flip between them, which is just a different level of genius,
Yeah.
which is super impressive. But kind of my experiment has to do with, if you take the language, the actual meaning of the words out, can you still actually convey humor by telling jokes? I'm not talking about doing slapstick or even just silly voices or anything.
Yeah. Just doing your
goofy.
same set, or you
Doing
same,
the same set,
Yeah.
which is obviously brilliant. But so much for that humility you were talking about. But if you can take that, and I still think that there's going to be so much of the nonverbal in there, and so much about, it doesn't matter what words you use, which goes back to kind of lots of things. You put in all this work and you build up these comedy muscles, and you don't realize what comedy muscles you've built up.
Yeah.
Right, so sure, you've been working on your biceps, but all the helper muscles that you got in there too.
Yeah.
I think those are the things that would come through in a set that is, again, you have to know it. You have to. It's got to be part of the. It's got to be one of those sets that just rolls off your tongue, and you perform it. You don't say it.
Yeah.
But if you do that performance minus the language, with substitute words, even gibberish, I think it would work to a certain degree.
I knew it was. Tom Segura does that too. Yeah, he does a Spanish show
Oh yeah.
because he speaks fluent Spanish.
Oh, that's
He
cool.
just does it. He looks like just a generic white guy, but but he's actually, his mom is, she's Hispanic. I'm not sure what
Gotcha.
nationality she is, but he speaks fluent Spanish.
I have a joke where I speak more Spanish than, and I don't bother to translate. But I went to Spain, and I have this great ability when I travel to watch TV in whatever amazing city I'm in, and so I was in Barcelona watching TV, and The Big Bang Theory was on, and so in Europe they don't have like English I didn't see any English subtitles on any of the TV, right? So I'm watching it, and I'm getting what I can out of my high school Spanish.
Yeah.
But like the thing that, and it's dubbed voices, but like I was doing the actual imitation of the show, because in Spain, I won't even be able to do the Spanish, but like Leonard's dubbed voice is like 12 años de las escuelas secundario, and so, but it's like this is my
deep voice, yeah.
And I was like, well, of course he gets Penny. Like they totally wrecked the show because
Yeah.
he's like sexy Spaniard.
Yeah.
He's got the geeky look, but the voice doesn't matter. And so there's a bit that I do in Spanish, and it doesn't matter what I'm saying. It's just
The way you say it.
It's the premise of sexy Spaniard. Of course he gets the beautiful woman.
That's funny. Yeah. So when are you going to do your? Are you going to do Are you wanting to translate one of your sets to Spanish? Is that the language?
Well, I kind of speak Spanish, so I think that would be a little bit of a cheat. And I might try it though as kind of like an interim, because like there's, even though lots of people aren't fluent, there's bits of Spanish in particular that sound like English, right? So there's a lot of words that are close. But then also that's also a language that people frequently hear, so that they might know a little bit more of it.
It'll be easier to get the inflections and stuff right.
Right, correct, because I know the language. But that's why if I translated it to like
should try Russian
or something like that.
I think Russian would be funny. I don't know why. We've got some Russian.
Or
some
German
Russian.
could be funny.
Yeah, German,
Well,
yeah.
the Russian accent is just, it's fun to do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, we've got some Russian and Ukrainian businesses over the years that we've worked with. Well, they're not Russian and Ukrainian business, but they're Russian and Ukrainian people that have immigrated here, and they've still got that accent. And I don't know why, but I'm infatuated with it sometimes. I'm like, oh, it's awesome.
It is an awesome one.
Yeah.
It's one that doesn't stick to a single stereotype, I don't think, because it can be super intimidating in certain circumstances and then seem really chummy and friendly in a different one.
Yeah,
so
true.
it's a real strange one.
Adam Sandler makes it sound like almost sometimes in his Dracula, one of the kids.
Oh,
cartoons.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like a Russian Dracula, silly. I don't know how to explain it, but like in Transylvania, what's it?
That's
called Transylvania. Yeah, but it's got some kind of Russian vibe to it too. I don't know if that was his intention, but
A lot of those Eastern European countries, a lot of the accents are similar.
Yeah. Well, for unsophisticated
my
American
ears.
ear, I'm like, like Gru as well as a a very good comical character with that same kind of accent.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I remember playing poker in Vegas, and there was 3 Russians at the table, and I couldn't have been more intimidated by them. And then I started winning, and then I was like, all right, I got this.
Are you playing Texas Hold'em or
Texas Hold'em, yeah.
Oh, okay. You still play or no?
Yeah, a little bit. It's it's tough to play, but we had a kind of regular home game pre-pandemic, and
Oh well. Off camera, we'll talk about a for fun game that's coming up in November or December here locally that maybe you can join.
Cool.
If you'd like to come.
Absolutely.
It's pretty. We're capping it at 50 people, but
Cool.
Yeah.
Happy to. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. What's your? I want to ask you about your day job.
Got it. Yeah.
What exactly do you do?
I work for a company called Medable. And it's a software company.
Okay.
And the industry we serve is clinical research. So our customers are pharmaceutical companies or companies that are conducting research for pharmaceutical companies. And then and then it extends, because clinical research can happen from academic and government sources as well.
Yeah.
But our software has a primary focus of bringing a clinical trial to the patient. So a traditional clinical trial, a patient would see an ad, go to the doctor, ask about clinical trials. It's really hard for people to find clinical trials when you're looking for one. But when they would participate, they would actually have to drive to wherever that site is. And so, a clinical trial might have 100 sites across the country, but the chances of you living near one of those sites is, even if they're picking areas of population to kind of center the sites within, there's just so many people excluded from clinical trials. So
right.
Our software does its best to bring the clinical trial to the patient. So you can do what they call a completely virtual or decentralized clinical trial. And in a decentralized clinical trial, you don't even necessarily need an actual physical site. You can do a virtual site, and all of the patients you can interact with doctors and nurses and medical experts and the team running the clinical trial all through your phone, whether it's the equivalent of a FaceTime, but our app does everything internally. And so you can see the doctor, they can see you. If it's a dermatology, or maybe it's a vaccine study, it's a coronavirus, and you have some redness around that, they can instruct you to show you the redness, and they can inspect that via the phone. But then there's things like connected devices. So if you need to track activity in some ways, or there are really, really cool devices that you can connect to your person that can measure your EKG or ECG, depending on which country you're from, or number of respirations, or there's a connected scale. So if it's a study that has to do with just BMI is an important thing, whether it's a safety or if a efficacy outcome, you can connect all these devices, and you can do some really cool things, right? So we have case studies where just unlocking studies that would not be possible in a traditional model. So
Right.
one of the case studies that happened before I joined, which is one of the reasons I did join, was the problem they were trying to solve was they were looking for a subpopulation of a pretty rare disease. It doesn't happen it's not so prevalent to begin with. And then they were looking for a genetic subset, which is less than 2% of the population that has the disease. And they wanted to get 600 patients, so they were calculating that they would need to screen somewhere around 14,000 patients. And by trying to find 14,000 patients in traditional sites, they were going to bring up 125 sites in Canada and the US. And every time you bring up a site, you have to train the staff. There's cost and time involved in all of that. And so, many, many thousands and tens of thousands of dollars every time you have a site. And then when you have patients at that site, you then have to monitor, you have to cleanse the data, you have to send people to the site, making sure that the protocol is being followed. There's lots of work that has to be done on top of that. So instead of the traditional model, patients were engaged. They did a pre-screening on their phone. They first consented. They did a pre-screening on their phone. Based off of that pre-screening, if they met the criteria, a lab kit was sent directly to their home. It was a genetic lab kit known as a spit kit.
Spit in
right?
the vial.
Yeah. So they spit in it, and then there was directions on how to send it back. And then the genetic tests were done once the vials were returned to the lab, and if they had if they had that marker that they were looking for, they get the app on their phone was updated and kind of told them the next steps. If they didn't, the pharmaceutical company could keep in touch and keep them for other studies, but they still had access to all of those patients. And that's something that would have been cost prohibitive for that company. They could not have run that study if they weren't able to do it. So we saved that company somewhere between $25 and $40 million, depending on whose model you look at.
Wow. So you guys use your data and technology to find the participants for the clinical studies, clinical trials.
Well, Medable is focused on the conduct of the clinical trials. We have partners, and we will be building up data assets over time. But our, the ability to kind of run an app where a patient can report their own outcomes.
Okay, so they're using your technology to do the trials.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really the infrastructure where we ourselves, Medable doesn't run the clinical trials. We just provide the tools,
the equipment,
so that you can. Right. And it's not necessarily the
mostly
physical
software.
tools, because it's software. Yeah. So when you do a study, a global study, and you have 100,000 patients in some of these vaccine studies, do you really want to be shipping them a phone, every one of those? That becomes cost prohibitive as well. Right. So the fact that you can do a bring your own device study and just go to the app store, download your app, and you're off to the races, that's really cool and powerful. Yeah. And one of talking about heterogeneity, that's one of the problems in clinical trials, that clinical trials don't really represent the general population of the U.S. They're getting an economic subset, but also a racial subset of the reality of America. That's why in some of the news stories, some of the coronavirus vaccine studies have been halted because they weren't getting enough minorities to participate. The idea with our app is that you can be more inclusive, because it doesn't matter if you pick a site in that part of the country, they can participate from wherever they are.
Yeah.
With the devices that any patient would typically have, and if they don't have it, then you can send the phone out to that subset. But it ends up being geographically inclusive and economically inclusive, and you get really good science. We have this mission of trying to cut out 50% of time, and also there's a huge cost savings in that, and it's a cool thing because a lot of people think of the pharmaceutical industry and they're like, villains. Right? I used to kick off a talk that I used to do lots and lots of talks, and I had a slide early on because I'm speaking to pharmaceutical, people that work in the pharmaceutical industry, and I had a slide that essentially was trying to be a kick in the butt, and I don't know if I would do it again, but it showed the least, like the most hated industries. And depending on what year it was, like there were years where the tobacco industry was like the fourth most hated, and the pharmaceutical industry was like the third most hated, or the second most hated. And I was like, for an industry whose mission is to save lives, we're right up there with tobacco.
Well, I think their mission is to make money and then save lives.
Well,
just kidding.
No, but I mean that's
the perceived mission is
correct.
They're like the necessary.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I find
guys.
about the people that are involved in clinical trials. The individuals often have like their head and hearts in the right place.
Right. Yeah.
And it's actually one of the things that I really like about Medable, but it's the roles that I've been fortunate enough to have roles that, sure, I'm making a salary and I'm making good money, and I'm lucky to have that role and that job and that income. But at the same time, if I do my job right, then clinical trials get better. And if I can make clinical trials, even if it's just bringing treatments to to people faster, there's benefit.
It's very important.
But if I can make it cheaper, like a lot of people don't understand that while it seems first of all, there's definitely some greed. Don't get me wrong.
Well, you should be rewarded if you're solving problems.
Right. Yeah.
Period.
Correct.
But I think that's the reason people have the stigma is they think it's all about the money. But obviously it can't be all about the money, because if they're not solving a problem, they wouldn't get any money.
Correct.
Yeah.
And when you think about a drug, bringing it to market and it costing $1 billion, and people are looking at their copays and they're like, yee, right? And I get it, because on an individual basis, I say yee, right? I say that too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you know what goes into it, and if you want the level of research, right? If you were just paying the cost plus 1% or something like that, there would be very little new research done. And I think it's pharmaceutical studies are so expensive that it actually discourages some of the stuff that we really want, because we would love to have as a population. How great would it be to have like like an antibiotic that would actually be in a different class, so that you wouldn't have multi-resistant bacteria strains out there, right? So to be able to attack bacteria from multiple directions, but it's so hard to get. To a certain extent, it's hard to justify research in new and novel areas if you don't have a relative certainty that you're going to be able to monetize it somehow.
Yeah.
It's really tough to take big risks.
Yeah.
And so to a certain extent, when I pay the what I feel is exorbitant, because it digs into my pocket pretty deep, at the pharmacy, I at least sit there and go, sure, I'm paying the CEO, I get that. But I'm also helping fund some of the other research that they wouldn't have done otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, I love science and technology, but I feel like as technology improves, these things become cheaper to do. And also, I could see a company like your company, maybe in the not too distant future, doing some of these trials or helping develop the technology for these trials. Maybe. Like Elon Musk has Neuralink now, where it's a neural interface with technology. So maybe once we start to go down that road, we can have you may have the majority of the population that has this interface that's implanted in their brains. You know, they've got nanotechnology in their body, and so if you want to do trials, everybody's in a trial.
Participating, yeah.
Like your body's constantly monitoring itself. Your genome's been sequenced. It's constantly doing checkups on you and letting you know, like, oh, you've got this problem.
Absolutely.
And it's compiling all that data, sharing all that data about people's bodies and their genetics.
And how cool would it be to use that data to detect you heading down a problem, like early warning signs and diagnostics before there's actual symptoms.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that
that technology may be able to fix the problem.
Well,
eventually.
Well, I mean, a lot of therapies have their success rate has to do with when the treatment starts.
Yeah.
So if you think about some conditions, like the fact that your phone might be the best way to detect super early whether you have Parkinson's, because as it turns out, subtle changes in your voice can be detected far earlier than like a visual tremor in your hand.
Wow.
And so when you think about that sort of study and the ability to, like, honestly, in that world, Verizon or T-Mobile might be your best diagnostic tool.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, if they were constantly checking and looking at your voice and looking for any of those changes.
You got a text that says,
go to the doctor.
Go to your doctor about Parkinson's.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a bummer.
Vocal change noticed, go see your doctor.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, those sorts of diagnostics, if you can, for any neurodegenerative disease in particular, if you can stop the neurodegeneration earlier, obviously you're in better shape.
Right.
And so, but the same thing is true for oncology, right? So if you can detect a tumor sooner, right? There's like the dream of being able to do a blood test regularly and detect cancer early,
right.
From certain markers that might be in the blood, and for certain types of cancer that might be more possible. But like early detection and diagnostics, like that's a thing that currently doesn't get rewarded in the same way as the drugs do. So there's less, there's often less research. But if we were really going to solve our healthcare problems, data is a huge way out of it. Even just to the extent of, if you knew a canonical way to treat a patient, and to know that if you take these steps, you're leading to the best likely outcome in the shortest number of steps, versus kind of the artistry and that a doctor might feel like, oh, in this case, I think this is going to be the case, because you have doctors who have a good gut feel, but then you also have a fair number of doctors that say, let me collect all of the possible data, and then we'll start to treat.
Well, they've already proven that AI is better at noticing problems than humans.
Yeah.
Right. Incomparably better.
Yeah. So I remember going to a talk, and I can't give credit to, and I doubt this data point was owned by this person, but they were talking about the billions of dollars that go into healthcare, and that a third of that is going towards, essentially from their studies, their big data studies, showing that the third of it is going to waste. If you could just eliminate that, right? So. And it's, of course you want people, you don't want to not try something, but on the other hand, if this thing that you're doing, this act, whether it's a test or whether it's a treatment, leads to success 0.01% of the time, why are you leading with that? Like that could be something that if the other things don't work, so like, why wouldn't we want the population to have a canonical way of treating people of if we know, but it's also got to be based on real biology, right? So if you're just basing it on white dudes, right, that wouldn't be proper, right? It needs to be representative of
diversity
people.
Of society, yeah.
But if you know that this is a person and they have these genetic markers and they have these kind of lifestyle choices, they're smokers or whatever, and now based off of this individual, the biology and the phenotype that they show and what their lifestyle is. If you know with high confidence that this is going to be the treatment, why not go with it?
Right.
And so that comes from, we have this problem in the U.S. in particular of having, data that isn't shared between. You could go from one doctor's office.
I almost
to
feel
the
like
other.
all data should be decentralized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean there are like Scandinavian countries that it's a single, essentially electronic health record, and there's a huge number of people that have opted in to do their genotyping, and in that situation, it may not be an incredibly diverse population, but they're going to have some really good data
Yes.
on holistic the biology holistically of that population to generate some really good ideas of how to treat that population.
Yeah. I'm actually getting my my genes. Was it my
Sequenced.
Yeah, my genome sequenced. Yeah.
Nice.
So curious. Hopefully, there's nothing scary in there.
Are you doing just the kind of the background so you can see your ancestry piece?
No, I'm doing the whole
thing.
The whole
and
thing,
you're gonna get the markers for you got this risk and that risk.
Right. Yeah. It's I can't think of the company's name. It's one of George Church's companies. Do you remember the name of that company?
I got it right here where you sent it to me.
Yeah. With this one, because I looked into Veritas, which I think Nebula Genomics. So I looked into Veritas, and I think George Church owns that one also, but it's more of just from a medical perspective, whereas Nebula, they'll sequence your entire genome, and then you have access to it, and they also protect it for you too, so it won't be shared.
And that's cool.
And it allows you to share it, and if you do share it, you can actually have the option to share it with for certain studies and stuff, and you get paid for it. But aside from that, I'm not really interested in that part of it. But I mean, I would if it was something beneficial. But you have access to all of their software when you get it done, and which is constantly updated, and you can go through it and look at all of the data yourself, and look for abnormalities in your genes or certain markers for problematic issues and things. So.
How cool would it be to discover something that could be an easy lifestyle change,
right.
Something that you didn't even really care about, and because you're just arbitrarily doing it because you've been doing it for years, but you make this slight change and you can avoid something, and it may not be that easy, right? That's a simplification, and that might not come up, but that would come up for a certain subset of people.
Or if you find out you're predisposed to some serious disorder. And you can kind of prepare your life for that.
Absolutely.
Hopefully that's not the case.
I would
mean,
love to know when to zero out my bank account.
Yeah.
And with a zero balance.
Yeah. Increase the life insurance.
I try to live each day like that anyway now.
Yeah.
So we were talking about not having a singular focus earlier. I'm going to go backwards, but I end up with singular focuses. I feel like they're singular focuses, but really I've got multiple ones, so it's not. but they're in the vicinity. So like
you're all related.
They're all related, and that you were talking about in comedy, like you don't have that singular drive, but you kind of have a singular direction.
Correct.
And I think that for me is more like this thing. But I try to live as part of this overall direction, as part of my plan. Part of that is just planning for, like you said, hey, I'd love to know when to zero out. Like if I zeroed out today, it's more of it somewhat to think about, but are things ready? Like what's going to happen? What are my children going to do tomorrow? What is my wife going to do? Like I try to think about those things today, but if you could, I'm going to get mine done as well. He sent me the link. And did you guys talk about, maybe I missed it, but the cost, like you're talking about these things like pharmaceutical, it takes $1 billion to bring something to market. But in theory, over time, like the cost, it cost $1 billion, I believe, in the 90s, you said, to sequence the first genome?
Yeah, I think it was something like that.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
And now it's $500, I think the deal they're going right now?
Yeah, right now it's $500.
Yeah, it'll be even faster. I mean, even in the time when I was in grad school, when I would try to sequence a gene, it was for me personally, it was like a nightmare. It was a long procedure, and it took a lot of effort. But
A gene.
A single gene, or even a portion of a gene, right? And so now they have these gene sequencers that are doing
Your whole genome.
the whole genome in an automated fashion.
And all of you have like 40 genes or something. What is it?
Well, you have 46 chromosomes.
46 chromosomes.
But you have, I think, 10,000 active genes.
10,000.
But I forgot how many base pairs. I mean, it's just a huge number. Like your DNA is
Millions,
just,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of DNA.
I'm confident when they see mine, it's probably going to cure something.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's
What?
probably
Scurvy. Go for
scurvy.
Go
yeah.
for like a
you go.
vitamin C deficiency.
Yeah, that's what it's going to do. I think it's going to kill it. I definitely know that whatever I've got keeps people from dying of anorexia, I think.
You have had trouble with keeping your vitamin D levels up.
Yeah, big time.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Not that it matters, but I guess specifically. But I've been working on it now for, I think, 6 months. And every day taking a vitamin D, high quality, and also being more conscious about being in the sun. And then this last month, basically living in Florida half the time, closer to the equator, obviously, getting better quality absorption. But for the first time in probably 8 years, my vitamin D has just gotten into the
therapeutic range.
Just now. And I've felt better over the last 2 or 3 months as it was rising.
Yeah.
But yeah, it took months. And now we're coming in the cold season. So I gotta be really careful that it doesn't plateau, it doesn't go back off the other end. But yeah.
To what you were saying about the cost, and you said too about the cost of doing this research and coming up with these therapies and stuff like that. I think technology obviously makes that cheaper, but it's exciting that we seem to be really close to quantum computers, and once we have functional quantum computers, it seems like these studies will be much more simple. Like maybe they can actually come up with a vaccine in a day.
Well, and the whole time to vaccine currently is taking advantage of big data. Right. So, because the concept of how fast the vaccine for coronavirus could have come out, how fast we could have safely come out with one. If you were talking about a couple decades ago, I mean, you're talking about years, many years. And then also, once you find something that's successful, it might even be a year to build up capacity to get to 1 million doses of it, because you would actually you'd be leveraging some animal system to create vials and vials of these things. So. The idea that you could use kind of the shape of the virus to have designer vaccines, which
and test them in a simulation.
Correct, and you can eliminate a whole bunch, and then focus based off of the 3D science that you're looking at,
right.
and essentially instead of having to race each horse individually, you're able to pick 3 horses that are likely to win to start with. When you're doing that, it just makes a lot of it just changes the game in such a way.
Yeah.
So for coronavirus, they're doing a lot of things that make from the production side, they're not even worrying about which company is going to come out first. They're just starting to ramp up manufacturing of doses of the vaccine, and if it comes out of clinical trials and it's safe, it's already there. If it turns out that it's not going to be safe, then they're going to have to destroy it or something like that, and we would have wasted money. But it's a real smart thing to do as far as trying to get treatment to people as fast as possible. To bet on every horse, build up the capacity for it.
Yeah.
It's cool.
So if quantum computers work like they believe they will, you could, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you probably have researched this because it's in your field.
Yeah.
But they could actually do the human trials in a simulated way, right? They could do it all in the system in the simulation, and then
even today you can do some levels of simulation. It doesn't necessarily replace the entire clinical trial.
Yeah.
And in some cases, one of the uses of data and essentially a reuse of data is, I think everybody kind of from a distance, at least, even if you don't know clinical trials, you know the placebo, right? So in a clinical trial, they're going to be comparing one population against another population and look for a difference. And there's many clinical trials where there's a population that's getting the drug, and then the other one that's getting a copy of the drug in the form of a placebo. So it will look the same. If it has a taste, it will taste the same, or if it's inhaled, it will have the same inhaler.
And magically, it'll work a little bit.
Yeah, actually, the placebo effect is an actual thing. Yeah. It's not just. And one of the things that I found fascinating is that different doctors can lead to predictable different levels of placebo effect. So, so it has. It's not just the person's belief. It's kind of the feeling that they have, I think, of being taken care of, perhaps.
Yeah, like they believe in the person that's helping them.
Correct. And so, because otherwise, how could you explain that a particular doctor would always have a higher placebo effect?
So doctors with higher emotional intelligence have better results with placebo.
But with big data, you could try to figure out what it is about that doctor that does that. But what they're trying to do, though, in the very least, is can they at least share data and simulate the placebo arm? So that, because in a clinical trial, to a certain, depending on the indication, the disease that you're looking at, there's the idea of not treating those people is potentially harmful.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you're in a study, everybody that I know that's been in a clinical study with a placebo has always been like, I hope I'm on treatment, right? So my brother's doing a COVID-19 study, and he's like, I hope I'm in the treatment arm, right? But that one's being compared against the placebo, and at the end they're going to see how many people that they've taken 50,000 that have the actual vaccine, and then 50,000 that have been injected with nothing, essentially, with a saline. And what percentage of people, assuming that if you're at 50,000 for each group, what's the percentage of people that are coronavirus positive? How many people get sick, essentially? And so if you can eliminate by an in silico test, right? So using the computer to synthesize that data, or look at actual data and simulate that placebo arm, you can do some pretty incredible things.
Well, maybe you wouldn't need the placebo arm anymore, because once we completely understand the human genome and what all the genes, like how they all function and how the DNA functions.
So if you had a really good picture of how,
so you just know it would work.
The clinical study is looking at, to run the scientific basis of a clinical study, you're looking at a delta, that if you provide this treatment, whether it's a device or a drug, and that drug could be a chemical entity or a biological, whatever it is, whatever treatment it is, does it have a benefit, right? Does it improve the quality of life? Does it improve? You can have many different measures of efficacy. And then you're looking at, depending on the disease again and the indication, you're looking at a balance of efficacy versus safety. So if you had something that was like an acne medicine that you were looking for approval, if it had severe side effects, you wouldn't be cool with that. Like the FDA would be like, no way, right? But if you're looking at sepsis, something that is pretty critical, and you had a drug that had a good chance of saving people, but on the other hand also had some pretty bad side effects. Well, in that situation, you're kind of in a, what are we going to do? We got to do something. And so you have a different equation of what safety profile you're willing to accept in those situations. everybody always, one of those hack jokes to get back to comedy is to make fun of the side effects in those. In those
side effects are longer than the actual commercial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's if those were, and sometimes they sound pretty severe, but if they are severe, they have relative to the condition, they have to be very, very rare. Yeah. Right. So you wouldn't want.
So it's like a last ditch option.
Yeah, but like a lot of the medicines that you're seeing, for, you'll see something that you'll think is a minor condition, but you'll see something and it'll be like, that sounds like an awful side effect. I'd rather just have the disease. But like you got to know that that's going to happen in 0.0001%.
Tiny percentage of the trial.
Well, and maybe that number wasn't fair because there's a threshold in which the FDA says if it is above this threshold, you have to have it on the label. And then in order to have it as a commercial, you have to. If you're advertising a drug, you have to be upfront about what the side effects are. That's why they're in all of those things. So there are many, many countries, like when people from Europe come over to the United States for the first time and they're watching
I've heard
TV,
them talk about it,
like, you're advertising your drugs? That's crazy.
It is crazy, a little bit.
Well, it is because it does take a little bit of, it changes healthcare a bit because the patients go to their physician and say, this is what I'd like to get this treated. And it's hard to say no to that, right? There's a reason that they're doing those advertising.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're all about marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's drugs, politics,
it's a consumer
social media,
society,
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all consumer, on some level. Yeah. They're turning us into consumers.
Yeah.
They, in quotations. Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, it's been a pleasure having you on, man.
Well, thanks.
It's been awesome.
It was fun.
Do you want to tell everyone how they can follow you and if you have anything coming up, any shows or any events?
Sure.
Anything special?
I think, as far as the Idiot Box, Facebook and Instagram, it's at IBX Comedy on Facebook, and it's at the Idiot Box Comedy Club on Instagram. And, we haven't been doing too much, but now North Carolina is easing up a little bit, so we started to do shows again. We'll have the Ultimate Comic Challenge, which is normally a huge event for us and for the comics because it's like last year there was 100 comics that entered into it. There's $1,000 prize, which for many of our comics is life-changing. We've had comics be able to move out of their car for a few months. It's been beautiful. So we have the UCC starting up this week, and due to the fact that there's still lots of people that are our customers that don't feel safe. Yeah. We try to make it as safe as possible. We limit our crowd, but like that's the real thing is that we're limiting the in-person audience to keep everybody safe. So for the first time, we're going to do both live as well as virtual. So that will be streamed, and you can kind of buy your tickets to the Zoom version of it as well. And since you have that live interaction, it will actually come across, I think, quite well. It's like
it should be good.
It's like the difference between just a Zoom call, that you do with work, and the Netflix specials where you're seeing comedy.
Right.
That's in front of a live audience, and that's why that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have that going on. We have shows going on, and then that and Next Door Beer Bar and Bottle Shop. If you can follow us on social media for that as well, then we'll be happy.
It's a cool spot too. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I've always liked downtown Greensboro. I thought it was, it was comfortable. It was, as far as downtowns go, it's one that I think invites people down.
Yeah, it has a cool creative vibe to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not the only one in North Carolina because I like Winston's downtown scene too, but I like Greensboro, and it's fun to see the differences.
Greensboro's kind of like a mini Charlotte.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always liked the fact that you could go down there and it's not a hassle.
Yeah.
Right? It's
easy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some places where it's tougher to park, but on our side of town, which is like near the ballpark, it's really easy to get a spot right outside the club. And
it's not overly crowded.
Yeah. Yeah, always love that.
So cool. Well, guys, if you enjoyed the episode, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.